Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So a common question I get is, should I use a high or low sensitivity? It's literally asked so often. You could even go to the YouTube search results and you'll look, what is the best sensitivity on Apex? So I know a lot of people are asking this question, and I'm making this video to help provide clarity on high sensitivity versus low sensitivity. In this quick video, I will discuss some quick pros and cons of sensitivity, and the thought process can be applied as well to controllers. I've said this many times, but individuals should find their own sensitivity. It is through discovering your strengths and weaknesses that you will really find your sensitivity that is best for you. So let's discuss quick pros and cons. We'll start with low sensitivity. Some of the pros are you're able to create a more fluid motion. You can be more precise through broader movement, and can be a desired sensitivity to create more consistency regarding accuracy, as you are less affected by certain variables. Some of these variables can include cold hands, sticky surface, humidity, being highly caffeinated, or even being really tired. Of course, this can affect low sensitivity, but the variable is less as there's less room for error. Cons. It can be difficult to create momentum and speed to track a really fast individual. It's difficult to keep engaged to gather information, so if you constantly have to make broad strokes and like do a 180, 180, 180, it can be mentally taxing over the course of, let's say, a few hours. You don't notice it right away, but you're obviously more engaged when you start playing than later when you're less engaged. And it's also harder to control random variables to correct, meaning when something flashes to one spot to another and you have to flick to it, or somebody does a quick 180 around you, or they jump over your head, it can be a little bit harder to be more engaged, snap to where they're located, especially if you have a smaller mouse pad. You need desk space, essentially. So high sensitivity. It's easier to snap to targets. You have a faster speed, obviously, and it's easier to survey information without excessive movements. You need, obviously, less desk space. So some of the cons are there's less accuracy in refined movements, unless you have tons and tons of practice, of course, and outside variables can cause issues while aiming. So we discussed on low sensitivity that you're obviously affected more here through the outside variables of being highly caffeinated, being tired, cold hands, or sticky surfaces. Just an example, compared to low sensitivity where that's less of an issue. This is all to be something mindful when you aim. You don't ever want to really sit at one sensitivity for the rest of your life, because you're growing and learning as you're aiming. You need to utilize your arm, wrist, and fingers. And even when you're on controller, you're going to be utilizing more practice momentum, how you're sitting. Everything comes into play whenever you aim. It's not just one spot that you're going to just focus all your energy on, because each of them come with a different dexterity. I stress this so much as it's okay to switch to new sensitivity to practice what you're doing. I'm going to give a few examples. Example 1. You find you struggle with tracking smooth movement, so despite having a low sensitivity, you go practice in the test range or Kovacs and raise your sensitivity by double to practice those refined movements in your wrist and fingers. This also helps tracking long distance targets as you're practicing everything up close range. This will also help in practicing long distance tracking because the movement is so refined. You have to remember whenever you're controlling recoil from a distance that the recoil is really not a large movement, especially when you're moving your mouse, compared to whenever you're obviously really up close and personal and controlling the recoil. Example 2. You're putting way too much pressure on your wrist, and over a long gaming session, you experience fatigue or discomfort. You lower your sensitivity so you do not tire out and aim to create a more consistent overall gaming experience. And of course, example 3, when you tire out, you learn bad habits. Some call it lazy aim, but if you run a low sensitivity and you are not engaged and your speed is not there, you will then be slower and start to create bad habits. So you raise your sensitivity to ensure you can keep yourself engaged and survey for information. Now, do not just go switching sensitivities like crazy, but you always, I said this many times in my stream, you have to mentally justify and know why you're making the change. So you're making a positive switch to learn something, to make something feel more comfortable, or because you know that this is going to help you in the long run. Learning is key. So as you get better, some variables may cause your sensitivity to switch from low to high. So here's an example. Example 1. As you better predict where your enemies are, the movement required is much smaller, therefore requiring less movement. And of course, if you were used to making those broad strokes, then you obviously need to slow down your sensitivity. This is because your in-game sense is becoming better, and your sensitivity shift may be required, because you're no longer making those large snaps to adjust for poor game sense. You're already predicting where the enemy is, and so the amount of movement required is smaller. So if you're running a super high sensitivity, this is going to be much more difficult to achieve. Hope that makes sense. Now, example 2. You're purchasing new equipment. Example would be a new desk, new mouse, new mouse skates, maybe some scuff controller, things of that nature, and your posture can also impact sensitivity. So again, the example would be a new mouse pad, new scuff controller for more dexterity, and those things impact this whole variable. Keep in mind variables, because even poor posture can cause bad habits or a sensitivity to change, because if you sit properly, you can have more arm movement, just as an example. So find a sensitivity where you are comfortable today, and stick with it. And don't be afraid to practice another sensitivity to learn the other spectrum of improving more refined finger movement, wrist movement, and arm movement, and so forth. Just be sure to write down your sensitivity settings, and you can always go back if needed. I really hope you guys found this helpful. It's just a question I get asked a ton on high versus low, should I switch, and what I should do, and I hope this adds some clarity to the situation. A lot of pros do this, a lot of people on Kovacs do this whenever you're practicing. I guess the best example I can step away from this is I have watched a YouTube video where basketball players were learning endlessly how to improve their speed. So what they would do is they would practice on the beach, and they would play on the beach and also run in sand. So whenever they're actually on the court, their movement felt like they were much lighter. So sometimes putting yourself in a more difficult scenario where it's maybe more difficult to track or requires more refined movement, that whenever you're practicing and pushing things to a more extreme and you go back to that 100% comfortable sensitivity, will work better for training. Again, hope you guys found this video helpful. Hopefully that example really puts in perspective how you should practice and how you should think outside the box whenever you're practicing your aim. Thank you again so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.